is 5 o'clock. So I am going to call our Operations Committee meeting to order. Our first bit of business is to approve the minutes from our February 14th meeting. They were on, and I'm sorry, Kim, are you ready to go?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
They were on board docs, and if no one has any changes to them, I would take a motion.
Move to approve the minutes.
All right, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right, minutes are approved, and I will turn it over to you, Matt, for our safety and security review presentation.
Sure, and I'm going to quickly turn it over to Chase here, but we wanted to come back to you guys and talk some more about safety and security in the district. We've had some conversations about what to do with students or what not to do with students. Of course, we continue to get national events that raise our level of concern and just keep the focus on what we do for security. And then we've had our own local events too, right, with a couple bomb threats and different items that raise our level of concern as we go throughout. But the team's been attending some professional learning at different points throughout the year or even the last couple of years. And I think we're ready to talk to you guys about a new way to language and message some information to our students and to our staff that would fit more probably age appropriate for students, easier to remember for the adults. Kind of a checklist type of, it's somewhat similar to Alice that I think you'll see some similarities there in the ease of remembering it, but I think the language makes more sense for an education environment. So I know Chase is excited to share it with you, so I'll let him go from there before I start saying too much.
No, it's all right. Thanks. I do get excited about this. We've done a lot of work on it, and I think it's really important. And I also sometimes get emotional when I talk about it, so if I do, don't worry about it. But first, as we get started, I want to just really thank real quick Kate Callahan and Kristen Peterson and Jeff Barnes. I might forget at the end, but that's kind of been our core team for the last year or so as we've done a lot of this work. And as Matt said, we've attended some national conferences. And then we had Randy made the presentation from our Hanover folks a couple of months ago, a board meeting. And so that kind of prompted us to come back together and provide somewhat of a follow-up to that. And that's what we're going to do tonight. We're going to focus on really 3 areas. An update on that engagement of students that we talked about. Some of the things that are going on at the state level. You might have heard of the safety grants and some of the apps that the state's been put out. And then kind of finish with a conversation about ongoing administrator training and then a lot of the work we're doing with local emergency management in a couple of different areas. And that's kind of a blueprint of where we're headed. But as we do that, really the why behind why we do this work, beyond student success, keeping our kiddos safe is, I think, something that we know is one of the most important things we do. And Matt just mentioned some of the things that have taken place. And so we put a couple of examples up there. Some you've heard a lot about, others you might not heard as much about, but that order is purposeful because while we spend usually about 95% of our time talking about the worst case scenario, i.e. an active shooter in our buildings, as we look at what we do around crisis management and student safety, that's really the order in what these events hit our school. Concerns about an odor in the building that 99 times out of 100 is nothing, but that's something that we have to activate our plans about. Or then looking at severe weather, and then we had a couple of swatting attacks recently, and on down the list. And so it's not just about that active intruder piece, it's also about these other different pieces that we have to account for. And as Matt said, that's really what helped shape our thinking when we looked at a potential new approach that we want to go with our students, our teachers, and our administrators. And you might have heard of it, but we want to pivot and start training our teams on the I Love You Guys approach. I Love You Guys is a foundation started by a family that lost their daughter in a school shooting in Colorado back in 2004, 2005. And the name I Love You Guys comes from the text she sent her parents before she died. And so it comes from a group of people that have lived through this trauma. And so it comes together a group of individuals that have actually walked this walk. And so we really find it powerful in the work that we're doing. You see a couple of statements there about it, building blocks for crisis management, and we love the second one. A standard response protocol is a simple shared vocabulary between staff, parents, students, and first responders. And that shared vocabulary should resonate with you, right, with HRS and some of the things that we're doing. So I'm going to get out of here real quick. and open a couple of documents. This just kind of gives you an idea of their webpage, and begins to let you look at some of the graphics that go along with the program that we put in place, and some of the language that we're going to use. They have a one-pager that we will start to utilize and also modify that goes along with this work that we can start to duplicate, put in different areas in our school. And what we like about this is that simplicity of the language, but also the flexibility allows to address any sort of crisis that occurs. It's not just about a school shooting. It could be used about any type of crisis, but the language doesn't change. And one of the pieces of feedback we hear from administrators, we hear from parents, we hear from staff and even students is, well, when you say lockdown, do you mean a soft lockdown? Do you mean hard lockdown? Which doors are we locking down, right? And this gets us out of that mindset of trying to play that kind of word vocabulary. And so really 5 different concepts that are easy to remember, have that flexibility of how we can use them. And as Matt said, is more student-friendly language in a way. And so we think that's really key to the work that we're doing. We can talk about it more later, but one of the questions that Matt asked us and others on the team have asked as well, does this mean we're abandoning ALICE training? And the answer is no. This, we believe, is an evolution of ALICE and some of those concepts, but again, to be more trauma-informed and to provide that better vocabulary. So we understand that one of the steps in this process is to bring our local law enforcement together to make sure we're all speaking the same language. But one of the examples of how they've changed their language, it's not even represented here, is we've probably all heard the phrase, run, hide, fight, right? That's common before it came to ALICE. The language that they're starting to use is avoid, evade, defend. And why they went with that language is they found the term fight, especially with educators, brings up such a negative connotation that people are hesitant to do it. But when you use the word defend, we're all ready to defend the people that we care about and that we love. And so even that easy or that quick change in just the vocabulary changes the messaging and the importance of why we do that. So we're really excited about starting to do this work, this training with our students and our staff. And I'm not going to show you this whole video, but one of the things we talked about was how are we going to train students and how are we going to get information to our students. And this is a video that I Love You Guys has available that we think we're going to be able to, we're going to be able to use with our students and our staff. The little, it's not little anymore, the young woman in this video was a student that survived the shooting at Sandy Hook. And so she's lived through this trauma. And so show this video. I'm just going to show you the intro so you get an idea of how it flows and why.
Important. There are things you adults don't like to talk about. But things happen at school, I need you to have a plan. And I need to know if you adults have a plan. So I'm going to talk about the standard response protocol. It's all about these simple actions. The first action is hold. Stay in your classroom, clear the hallways. The second action is secure. Get inside, lock outside doors. The third action is lock down. Locks, lights, out of sight. The fourth action is evacuate. The location will be announced. The fifth action is shelter. The hazard and safety strategy will be announced. So let's get started and learn about hold.
Your classroom or area, clear the halls.
Means to get sorted out. So stay in our classroom even if the bell rings.
Try to do classwork, but remind your teacher to lock and close the class door.
Well, I'm your targeting for my next class.
Not
I won't go through it all, but 7 minutes, right? It's in kid language. It uses a student. She goes back and forth and explains it. They have apparently 5 copies of her. She's sitting there 5 times, and they also mix in an adult. And so it really provides somebody that students can identify with, and it puts it in terminology that we believe won't create that sense of trauma for students when we do this. One of their taglines is no drama, no trauma. And so we really like that because they're trying to be sensitive to students, but also getting that information to them in a way that we believe resonates. And so as we kind of reflected on the conversations we had with you all, that's why we're really excited about moving this I love you guys approach. And we shared an exec cabinet and a cabinet today, but we haven't taken it to admin council. We have a large part of our time set aside next week to now introduce it to them, since we're having this conversation with you, and start embedding these concepts into the work that we're doing around this piece. Anything to add around this?
I think you're doing well.
We'll just come back to questions at the end, but this is really exciting, so I can keep myself going, so I'll just keep talking about it. The second piece we wanted to talk about was the state level support. We mentioned that sometime every year that the state put out $50,000 grants per school across the state, and that by applying, you can get these dollars. And we've obviously applied. That's about $1.5 million to the district in safety upgrades if you look at it, all 30 of our buildings. And we had gone to a couple of different conferences and had done some research and tried to look at what we thought would provide us the best return on investment for these dollars. And what we've come to is this idea of having ballistic window film. I won't show you all the video today, but if you might want to click on it, we're going to show it to admin council next week. And it's from the incident, the shooting in Nashville last week. And it's from their security camera inside the front hallway, and it shows the shooter coming to the front door, shooting out the glass, kicking it out, and then going into the buildings. And we know that glass areas are one of the largest vulnerabilities that schools have. They make these ballistic films that we can put over the glass that they will not shatter when they're hit by a bullet, and it will not allow for the perpetrator to kick down the door. And so it provides additional time for kids to evacuate, for kids to hide, for us to call 911. As we look at all the security upgrades we've made to our buildings, we believe this is one that will be extremely beneficial and hopefully something we never use that we would do across all of our buildings. Obviously, a school like West is going to be much more costly than a school like Shemmack, and so we're prepared to add district dollars to the installation that needs to happen at West to make that a possibility. If there are buildings that have dollars left over, we're going to work with those building leaders about what other security improvements would they want to see. Something we hear is more cameras, and so that's something we are looking into. But we believe that the next safety measure we should put in for our buildings is this ballistic window film, simply because not locking our doors or having things that are easily accessible are how people get in. And the more we keep them out, the more time we provide to save our kids. And we think this is one that will go a long way towards that. And the way the grants work is we have to, you might help me out here, we have to actually do the expenditures and then we get reimbursed, correct? So we'll put out the money to make all these purchases, work to get it installed, and then we'll be reimbursed from the state for the expense.
Will we be doing the interior windows on classroom doors or just the exterior?
Just exterior, I'm not sure, we probably won't do every single window. We're going to focus on those main entrances where there's lots of glass, because that's where the research shows that they come through, especially the front office, because they try to come in and kill leaders before they go into the buildings. So we'll probably work with some outside experts and help us, our local law enforcement, about where maybe we should concentrate our efforts at the buildings when we do that. And at the end, we're going to talk about a lot of the neat partnerships we have going on with some of our local law enforcement as well in this area. So you guys have
Would that go like on first story windows and say, and be as an elementary schools with?
We're still kind of working through the details and trying to figure out, we're still trying to get pricing. I think Jane, that'll be part of it too.
I meet tomorrow with our first rep.
So to say that $50,000, depending on how far we can make it go, will influence some of that. Yeah.
The Safe and Sound app, this is something that's actually live on the DE's website. And we haven't made a lot of noise about this yet, although our schools are all active on it, because we want to make sure that it doesn't conflict with our Say Something or See Something, Say Something campaign and getting people to submit information that way. But the Safe and Sound app is something similar to See Something, Say Something, where it sends an alert to the building leadership if there is some sort of threat going on in the building. I think it's a complementary piece, and we're appreciative for the state to put it out there. Kristen is listed on every building because Kristen is our communication contact point for a lot of things, including crisis management, as well as every principal. So if you went out there, you can find it, and there'll be a drop-down box. You can click on any one of our schools, and if you enter all the information, hit submit, Kristen's going to get a notification along with the principal of that building. So it's up and running right now. What we're trying to do is just figure out the best way to incorporate it into our strategy of things that we're doing to make sure that it doesn't create confusion. So that's two of the state level supports that we have going on that we wanted to make you aware of as we do this work. And then really, this ongoing work where we are with our administrators and our engagement with local emergency management is something I want to share and then engage with you all in some dialogue and conversation about. And it's going to start with us introducing and then looking at our building plans, following that I love you guys approach. We did a lot of work here last spring or over the course of this year on reunification. And we have a plan that we've practiced and we've executed here is if there was a mass casualty event at one of our buildings, where would all those students go? How would we support them from a district level? We don't share that place because that's not appropriate. And we've worked that. Well, what we learned even last week with the bomb threat at Northwest Junior High is we don't have solid reunification plans at our actual buildings. Some of them have reunification sites, but what happens when they get there? How do we set up those same protocols that we would have in place to release students or send them back to the school? And so we need to work with our schools on that, and that's what we say building reunification, but really just that overall I love you guys approach. And again, that idea of action-based, flexible, and easy to learn. And then also that identification of crisis leadership team roles and responsibilities. Kimberly Fenton, you all met her. She's a great principal. Kimberly was in Atlanta when the bomb threat came in last week, and Erin Thompson stepped up and did a really, really nice job navigating that process for Northwest. But it's just an indication of you don't know when crisis is going to hit. The same thing actually happened in Parkland in the shooting in Florida. The principal was out of the state when that shooting happened, and so we know it's important not only to have these roles and responsibilities, but to drill them with our teams so they understand what they should do and how those should be lined up. And then a crisis response kit. We just want to make sure that our buildings are prepared in a way that if this happens, they know what to do. And so we want to go over this spring and then continue to do this work with them over the summer and into next year. We don't want it to happen, but we know levels of crisis have happened even in the last couple of weeks, and so it's better to be prepared than not prepared at all, and we just need to keep doing this work. We're not alone in this work. We continue to collaborate with our local, I'm going to sit down for a moment, the local emergency responder services, and we are really excited about some of these things. Especially the first couple of few, is that we worked with Johnson County so that the dispatch center over at JMAC has remote access to all of our video cameras in our buildings, so that if there was an intruder in the building, we could tell them what building and they would be able to have eyes on the perpetrator right at that time. We talked just a minute ago, I shared about the roles and responsibilities. At the Parkland shooting in Florida, they had great roles and responsibilities laid out for all the administrators. The responsibility of one of the administrators was to go get on the school cameras and try to relay information to the police about what was going on. Administrator executes their responsibility, goes to the computer, pulls up the camera, gets it to the point where the action starts, and then watches several of his colleagues and dozens of his students be killed. And so he watches that, and then he watches the perpetrator go down the hallway into the west stairwell, and he starts radioing out. He's in the west stairwell, he's in the west stairwell. So the first responders, they set up a team at the top of the stairs and a team at the bottom of the stairs. And they wait, and they wait, and they wait. And after 10 minutes, one group comes down and one group comes up, and he's not there. Well, the AP was in such shock that he forgot to tell them that he rewound the video. And so there was a 20-minute lag between what he was reporting to them and what was actually going on. In that time period, the shooter escaped the school, actually went to McDonald's, sat down, had a sandwich, and then was out in the community. So we think things like this, to give our outside partners access, will help avoid that, right? Because they're trained to do that, trained to watch that, and will be able to respond. And then you don't put that burden on anyone inside our system. The remote access for the building lock system, we have a great electronic lock system, but it's kind of the same concept. We've had these conversations about, do we give them keys to our buildings? Who has that key? How do you control that? We've got 3 municipalities. They have X number of cop cars. You don't know who's going to respond. How many keys are we going to generate? So instead, we decided to give them remote access to our building. So the same concept. If there's a crisis, the folks in that center can unlock or lock the buildings on command without ever coming on site. As great as the response was in Nashville, if you watch the video from the body cam of one of the police that entered the building, he drives up, gets out of his car. There's some great dialogue with a couple of the staff members that work there. But by the time he sees that door until he opens it, it's almost 30 seconds. Standing there and then fumbling with the key. And that's not on the police, right? That's on how the school district can be a better partner. We could have knocked out 30 seconds of them from being in the school simply by having remote access to our buildings through our first responders. And so, same with the maps. We do that already. We're also considering a new technology so that on their screens in their car, when they got to the building, they would have the layout of the building right in front of them when they go. Intellisy, thank you for approving this contract in the fall. If you remember, we talked about that for each incident, we can set up who gets a notification. So if there's water on the floor, the custodian and the principal get a notification. If there's somebody that's touches the building, it's the principal. We can actually put our local first responders in that loop. And so if a weapon's spotted in the school building, they can get an alert immediate from Intellisy without anybody calling from the district. So just at the same real time it would notify our administrators, it would also notify the local law enforcement that there was a building discovered in our schools. And then ability to patch into district radios. We have to keep communication at high levels. And so it's just this continual partnership that we're trying to do across our municipal friends to make sure that we're prepared and that we're not always reactionary, but we're actually preparing on the front side. And I'll tell you, this last piece that I want to talk about just a little bit before we have a better discussion, I mean, just chatting, is something we found in a gap over the last week is our response when there's an emergency or a natural disaster. We tell kids what to do in a tornado, but in all honesty, we didn't have a really great plan articulated for our building administrators or great collaboration that we shared with people about how we support our students in the aftermath of a disaster like this. We had a PTO that stepped up at Kirkwood to really help some families out. It unfortunately created some consternation because everybody had the best of intentions and was working forward, but they just weren't collaborating at the right level. And so it was a lesson learned for us as we look at all the different types of crisis management and emergencies, that this is one we can't forget. And so we're going to work on strengthening those partnerships. They're already really strong, but it's really more about making sure that we have the information from our local partners and that our principals have it, our SFAs have it, and that everyone in the community has it so they know where to go and so we can make sure that families get the support that they need immediately. And
because it was kind of a lesson for our, like Chase is saying, for the county as well, right? Because we had people moving for 48 hours before we were on a call on Monday morning, right, with Johnson County Emergency Management. So you have a principal that's moving, you have a PTO that's moving, knocking on doors, everybody's trying to help. And we hadn't had the high-level conversation to know where do you want us pointing these people, right? Like, where are the resources that are in place to do that? So then everybody's trying to fill these holes. So again, we're going to get better because of it, right? So then we, figure it out on Monday, Tuesday, work on it all week, right, to try to get the families connected where they need to be. So good intentions by everybody. It's just you start getting everybody helping, and then what is the way we be the ideal to do it? So.
And so then just to circle back to where we started, our takeaways for this evening It'll focus on all the potential school crises, not just the one that could be the most severe, because most likely that's not what it's going to be, but we are going to have a school crisis. And so how do we best prepare our teams to prepare? And we think it's by implementation of I Love You Guys, because of that flexibility, because of that ease of implementation, because of that, that common language. It really helps us meet those needs. Ongoing administrator safety training, and then continue to partner with our state and local programs and collaboration on those pieces. And I know that was high level and not the longest, but I wanted to leave time for collaboration. In all honesty, we keep it high level on purpose, because unfortunately the bad people look for our vulnerabilities and say, listen to these conversations. And while there's nobody else here, we can't prepare like there's going to be no one else here. So happy to answer questions, but and please know it's never that we're not trying to hide information in this regard. It's just we want to make sure that we need to do what we need to do to keep our kids and our staff safe. So thanks again to the team. We are really excited about this work, and I hope that I never have to use it. Right? I've never been more excited about work that I hope no one ever gets to see in action. But we take it really seriously, because if we do have to use it, we want to put our kids and our staff and our families in the best position possible. So, questions or comments or feedback?
Go ahead.
Talk about similarity or equality of safety measures for each building across the district. In your discussion, you indicated that there might be some differences that we're going to allow principals to consider in their building, and some other factors too, differences in the physical nature of some building. Frankly, I'm quite bothered by the notion that we'll wind up with some schools being ostensibly safer than others, and I'm sure we don't want that.
And if that's how it came across, Charlie, that was unintentional. The way the grants are set up is that they're to each school, not to the district. And when we partnered with the county was very much, this is the school decision, not the district's decision. But we agree with you. We need to have set safety measures across all the ways. And so we think we have that. And where we don't, we're making those improvements, whether it's the West High vestibule, the redoing the vestibule at Coral Central to make sure we have those secured entrances. We just want to provide the buildings some flexibility to help us and collaborate on those dollars. If, for example, we don't spend the entire $50,000 doing the ballistic window films, that's a non-negotiable. But and I meant to ask Jeff or Les for this number, and I don't have it, but we can get it for you. Through FMP 1.0 and FMP 2.0 so far, we've spent millions of dollars on safety upgrades, and we try to keep those consistent, whether it is the electronic locks in all our buildings or changing on the outside. And Lisa asked about the internal windows, but we've gone through at least one, if not two different sets of door locks to make them the easiest possible in case there's an intruder. And I actually brought this. You might have seen these when you're walking around. And I have to admit, when Kate first told me about this, I was like, we're not cutting up Iowa football schedule magnets and putting them over our locks, but they're actually really nifty. They go on the door jamb in the inside of the door. And I won't close this door, but kind of like over here, if this was one of the tongue-in, what do you call it, Jeff? One of our doors in a latch door, and it allows us to actually keep the doors locked, but they can still keep them closed. And so if you would ever need to have a lockdown in your classroom, the teacher doesn't have to fumble with the keys to the door. They simply pull this off, close the door, and the door is locked. And so we started using it here at BSC. We have a couple of buildings that use them. I mean, some of these really simple things that help provide the best safety. And so we're trying to get some of these ideas out to our buildings to start using them. But Charlie, to answer your question, to be quite honest with you, and Jeff might have a slightly different opinion, but I think if I looked at the safety of our buildings, the ones that I would consider are less secure than others would be our buildings in some of our neighborhoods where the neighbors have put up a tremendous fight against us fencing in the property. We have a number of elementary schools, just a handful, that still don't have fences. And
Because of neighborhood opposition.
yeah, and fences
We can
are,
deal with that.
okay, I mean, we would enjoy that support, because I think there's
They
this
don't have- They
idea.
don't have the right for the school not to have a fence.
That's our take on it. And we've never brought that to this board, so that's not a knock
Right.
on anyone here, but as you look at differences, I think if somebody went up to two of our elementary schools, they'd be like, well, that one doesn't have a fence. I wouldn't have to go to the front door, they'd be like, that one doesn't have a fence. And so that
It's like
would-
the shared backyard scenario, right? I mean, we have the grass area, it runs into the neighbor's backyard, and they feel like we're encroaching on their backyard, right?
The
If we
county
would
has
put up the
very
fence.
Clear definitions of property lines.
Yeah. You said there's clear definitions, right? Is that what you said? Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So, but in terms of the upgrades, Dwayne and Jeff and the teams did a great job as we went through FMP 1.0 and this far 2.0, making sure that we continue to provide those safety upgrades. We appreciated this money from the state because it let us do something we hadn't done yet, and we really do believe this is the next thing that we should be spending our dollars on to upgrade buildings.
Two things. Thank you for all of this. It's really wonderful. I'm really happy to see that you're going to firm up the plans to the response to the weather emergencies, because I think we're going to have more and more.
Yep.
And I will say that I was really impressed with the way the Kirkwood community kind of came together and responded like the very next morning. So that was great. So one question I did have, something that's circulating on social media lately, is this idea that you should tell your kids that if there's a fire alarm, that you should not respond to it, you should stay in your classroom, because this is a tactic for school shooters to get people into the hallway so that they can gun down more. And that you're less likely to die from a fire than you are from.
So you're saying like after an event has already occurred, right? After they've gone into a lockdown maybe and then a fire alarm?
You're
No, I'm saying your fire alarm's pulled,
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
they're saying don't follow it.
And so, yeah.
Yeah.
We don't have
Have you heard about that?
There's
or-
been a couple
okay.
of incidents where that's been how they've drawn people out of the
Yeah.
classrooms, yeah.
So,
We're not advising them against doing that at this point. I mean, if there's a fire alarm, then we would still, be asking our students to do that. I think there's a level of awareness.
So that's what I was gonna say, to Molly's point, is why that is a concern, but we don't have as heightened level here, is that we've gotten rid of probably 95 to 97% of our actual pole alarms.
Most schools only have two.
So if there's if our fire alarm goes off,
It's a good.
It's been activated.
It's been activated through a phone, through a ceiling sensor. Isn't that where they are, Jeff? It's basically.
Well, once the buildings all became sprinkled, we didn't have to have the pole station, so yeah. So the smoke, either smoke or heat detector will set it off, so sprinkle.
I mean, I don't know how widespread that information campaign is, so I don't know if that's something that the district needs to, inform parents of it.
I thought you were going slightly different place, obviously, but if you go out and look at some of those videos, the I Love You Guys campaign has done a number of different videos on some of the trainings they've done in different schools, and I think that we're still trying to figure out how much active training, and not an active shooter, just like how much actual lockdown training with our students. But one of the things they talk about, they interview students, and they're like, if they knock on your door, we don't open the door, because the people that need keys to our rooms have keys. And so no matter who knocks on your door, no matter if they say they're the principal, the police, or if a fire alarms are pulled once an emergency starts, the training teaches the kids to stay in the rooms and to stay there, because the people that care about you will have a key to get in there. So that's kind of where I thought you were going, but the part you're talking about that knowledge, yes, that's part of the whole campaign, is how do we equip students and staff with the knowledge they need to best respond in the situations that confront us.
I just had two things. With the weather event, I really liked seeing that we're gonna see if we can utilize our gyms as storm safety shelters, because I did see quite a bit of that online. People asking, where can I go? I don't feel safe at home. And I know the North Liberty Community Center opened up, and I think Corville did too, but if we're able to open our schools as storm safety shelters for severe weather, and then publicize that out so that people know that that's always a safe place to go. I think that will help, if it makes sense.
Yeah, we talked about the same thing, right? I mean, so that's been part of our conversation back to the county about, because some of our facilities have been upgraded, to be safer places for these type of events. I don't think, we don't have any specifics to share on that with you, but we asked ourselves the same question, right? If that's a way we can communicate, especially to an area where they may not have a safe place to go, if they're in apartment buildings or something where there's not a basement that they can get to, that the school may be the safest place to be. And so we'll continue to work with them on that and seeing how we can publicize that if that's the case.
And what's nice about that is we typically have some heads up notice that there's bad weather coming through. And so it would give people time to have a plan and then execute their plan. And then with the collaboration with local emergency response services, I'm really blown away by what we're doing. I think that's really, really excellent collaboration and communication. I wonder if we can explore with Johnson County Management System running a drill, maybe in the summer. I was part of one, and I think we did a school shooting scenario. We may have done a mall shooting scenario, but we did it up in Cedar Rapids a couple of years ago. But we actually execute the plan and make sure that the access to the cameras are working and the remote access for all these things that are supposed to work, we do a mock simulation. Plus it helps those guys get training under their belt.
That's what, we have them reaching out to us.
Good.
It's good, okay, we'd like to be part of that. The Johnson County Ambulance Service wants to be part of it. And so it's something we're trying to figure out how we set up with them, and how we would do that.
It's no small feat. It's not easy to do, but if we can get it done, I think it just really makes everybody feel more confident about executing their roles the day of. And then I lied. I have three things. My last thing, this is great about what we do when the threat happens. Are we still using threat assessment and Virginia model to try to get ahead of those threats and identify them before they happen?
Yes.
Do you want to add anything more?
On threat assessment in general, just that continues the additional training for staff as well. And I just actually walked through that process with an administrator today. So, it's an ongoing daily plan on how we address those threats and then provide care for students and families.
Thanks.
I do like the idea of us looking at it like a continuum stuff. Having the threat assessment be part of this continuum. That kind of puts bookends on what we're trying to address.
Well, it makes sense if you look at the history of those mass events.
Yeah.
The vast majority of those shooters have a relationship to the school. What was that stat we heard, that the kid from Parkland had been referred 50 or 60 times right to the office?
Scary.
And they knew, and yet they didn't have any sort of process in place to catch it on the front end. And so it's a good point. You're right, that is a good way to look at it as a continuum.
So, do you think the students are clear, or will be clear, that the drill, when there's a drill, what the drill is it, what's caused the drill? Either an active shooter, a simulation, a tornado threat, some windstorm threat, is that? To me, that if I were a student, I think that'd be a little queasy about that. What am I to do now?
So I think the first part, if we would do a drill, yes, we would hopefully put parameters in place to make sure it's clear. I think Charlie, kind of based on the feedback we get from the board and where we are, we're not sure yet how in-depth we want some of those active drills to be. But yes, there's directions from the I Love You guys or other programs about how they announce a drill, how they set it up, how you even tell the community beforehand, hey, we're doing a drill, so that everybody knows, and so that you make sure that they have that understanding that this is a drill. But are you talking more about how would they know what to do, or are you making sure they knew it was a drill?
Among them all?
Yeah.
Well, that's the angle I was going to take on it a little bit, Charlie, is that, so for fire drills, tornado drills, right, we obviously practice those, and there's some more, I think, standard probably knowledge from our kids about what those look like. I think where we're less clear is that basically the continuum Chase walkthrough. And I think what this would allow us to do is, you guys all get the emails, right, where we have a student in the hallway and, you know, is having some kind of a episode during that period of time, and the kids have to be held, right? Well, what this can give us is some common language to say, okay, if you're told to do this, and it's this type of a scenario where you're kind of like, we've gotten confused before with those words about soft lockdown, hard lockdown, what does that all mean? Well, if you're held in your class, you know it's probably this type of a thing. If we come over the intercom and say this, then we know it's an escalated concern, right? So it starts to create them also some confidence, I think, for the kids to know, okay, yeah, we're being held in class right now, but this is probably the range of reasons about why it is, right? That it's not something more serious going on. If it's something more serious, they're going to tell me this. And so I'm not sure we would need to drill that escalated scenario as much as the kids having the knowledge that, okay, if it's the big deal, if it's that big deal scenario, here's what they're going to say, and this is what it's going to feel like in comparison to, oh, we're just asking not to pass in the halls right now until we deal with this medical emergency. Is that closer to what you're talking about?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of from the perspective of kindergarten students. What it looks like for very young kids.
Well, and the instruction, I think, to really young kids, right, is, you know, follow the directions of your teacher, right?
Yeah.
Here's the language we're going to use for these different
I
events.
think that's where
yeah,
your staff
yeah.
and the education and training you do with your staff are going
Right.
to have, up and down, it's going to be PK through 12th grade is going to have a big,
But that'll work, right?
my experience is, yeah.
And then you're using that common language. So, you know, when you have a tornado, you're going to say shelter. And so kids from starting at kindergarten start to hear that terminology, or even if the fire alarm is going off, if there's a chance to say we're evacuating, or if it's for whatever reason, it's the response. There's 5 actions, and then there's a response for both students and then for adults, so that adults can take that also and give direction for students. But you're going to start hearing that language over and over from kindergarten on, and your staff becomes familiar with it too.
And over the years, we have done, training with students, at least at the high schools, where we did lockdown training. You know, so that really then is contingent upon your internal communication systems and the, effectiveness of those. And then they look to you. I mean, it's the staff person or the teacher tell them what to do. And they, in those moments, even ones where there weren't drills and we've had them, and they listen.
That's what I was going to add is I think the kids mostly feed off of the adult, and this provides clarity for the adults and the teachers in the building to know what's happening. So then if I know it's a hold as a classroom teacher, my response is just going to be a lot, different than we're evacuating. That's where I think the kids would feed off of.
Okay, that helps a lot.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to create a lot of anxiety for our students just because it's an unknown, like what does this mean? But yeah, you're right.
Yeah, no, it's 100%. Because that is, I think you're right, Jane, that the anxiety, even in the drills, we would take into consideration, we always have, when they're not drills, when we kind of do them, there's a lot of debriefing that goes on, and we have really great people that do it, because it affects people differently, for sure. So.
Well, and especially in a crisis, communication is continuous. And this is just to train them for the words so they act immediately. So that we say lockdown, so everybody starts doing that. But then the communication from whoever that person is on site needs to continue to then give more information. There's an active shooter. He is by the gym, if you were here, right? But it's just to set that stage. And so it's to start to form those reflex motions by individuals that they just hear that one word and then it sets off that chain of events. It doesn't by any means mean that we wouldn't continue to communicate. It's just to get the process started, because one thing they found is that if you go into one of those, it really doesn't matter. I know it matters, but it doesn't really matter what the details are on the first word. If we need to evacuate, it doesn't matter if it's for an active shooter or if it's for a fire. We need you to start getting out of the building. Right. And so we say evacuate, the student knows what to do, the adult knows what to do, and then we will start giving you more information. And so it's really just that top layer. Kate has done a tremendous job over the last couple of years developing out our plans step by step to the point where we have binders that are very thorough, that are good for reference and good for us to utilize as we train and as we learn and then as we kind of deconstruct and do tabletops after an incident. What I like about this is that sheet can be something, of course I'm not wearing anything I'm supposed to be wearing, right? That we can put even on the back of an ID card, so that if you're wearing an ID card and you hear that, all you have to do is turn it over and you have the 5 steps you're supposed to take and you have the 2 steps you're supposed to tell your student. You're not going to some folder or some binder to waste that time. It's so flexible and straightforward and easy to understand that we save those seconds. And I think that that's what this is really about, is preparing kids so in the moment they don't freeze. We make sure that we start moving right away and then continue that forward.
Thanks for your
The other part we like is, and I think that's what you're talking about, is it's a common language for families too.
Yeah.
So families can start to learn it and it helps with those communication pieces outward.
Other
Anything else?
questions, guys?
Thanks.
I think unfortunately we've gotten good at, practicing and then also debriefing. That's something we've got better about, I'd say, over the last 2 or 3 years. We're better about some, as we put in systems, practicing them, and then even, for example, after the Northwest situation that week, we did a couple debriefs, right, to say, okay, what worked, what was something that was missing from our system, what would we do different again next time. It was actually, from a debrief standpoint, really valuable because we had a couple key team members out when all that was going on. So it was like people had to jump into some roles. I think Eliza, figured out a lot about our communication systems because Kristen was out. And so Eliza and Kim were working on that.
We got it.
So that was good for us though on some level, right? Because we had to test, some of our backups about, okay, how good are, our backup systems for somebody cold to pick it up and be able to do.
We kind of jump in there right
Yeah,
there. And it goes back to something we talked about earlier, is Eliza actually wasn't necessarily cold, and we just didn't see Eliza walking down the hallway and say, Eliza, do communication. Eliza and Kristen are on our communication team, and we drilled that early in the year on our reunification. And so we didn't have to go looking for somebody. When Kristen was out, Eliza already knew.
Yeah, she knew the role she would have to jump into. Yeah.
And so we've already seen some of our training help us respond in a way because of some of the work we've already started doing down here at the district level.
That seems really good to me because these are very good concepts and very good outline of what you want to do. But clearly, we have to practice it.
Absolutely.
Practice it.
And I can't wait to take you to my next fence meeting, Charlie.
Charlie's ready.
I'm ready. I'm good to go on that.
I think several of us will attend that fence meeting.
Right now, we're putting it in today.
All right, so last thing on our agenda is our May Ops meeting, which will be May 9th at 5 p.m. And our topic will be...
Discretionary busing. We gave a presentation to the board back in the fall, and we appreciated the feedback and to look at a system that we could revisit annually. Originally, discretionary busing was something we were considering part of the budget process, but we moved that off because of the importance it plays for a number of our families. And so by the May meeting, we'll be ready to come back and chat with the board about the process that we're utilizing, and then also let the board know what routes will be on slate for the 23-24 school year as it works with discretionary busing. So that's our topic.
Great. Anything else from anybody? Is there a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Right.
Aye. All right, thanks guys. See you next
Thank you.
month.